Hello again, everybody. It is Samu here hosting this week for My Taste is Better Than Yours. And just as we did in the previous episode, continuing the Rurouni Kenshin journey, we're back to me and we're continuing the Bleach journey. This time we're doing the Arrancar arc. Enzo, thank you for joining me and continuing this read along of Bleach and the biggest arc in the series as well. Thank you.
You ain't kidding.
Um,
600 chapters.
it's almost there. Yeah, it's one hell of a episode this time. Because the Arrancar arc is so long, we're probably going to split this into two episodes. This one is likely to cover the first half of the arc, which is going to be the Arrancar Invasion sub-arc and the Hueco Mundo sub-arc. Because the Arrancar arc is so long, sometimes people even just identify it by these sub-arcs rather than one big
I noticed
complete
that.
story. Yeah, but it is referred to as the Arrancar arc when Kubo ends it as well, so that's what we're going by. So yes, this is going to be the first half, and we will continue next episode with the Fate Karakura Town, as well as the Turn Back Pendulum arc as well. So strap in, get on board, and yeah, thank you Enzo for reading. And first of all, I'm going to kick off with the question that I know is something you're considering, especially since I had to not convince you to read this, but I had to push you because it was such a daunting task. This is a big chunk of story. This is 27 volumes, 253 chapters.
Yep.
Do you think, I was looking over it, is this one of the longest arcs of manga, do you think?
It's probably the longest arc I've ever read. Which I was trying to think back. Not every series cuts itself into big arcs, but among the ones that do, I can't think of another arc that lasts 27 volumes off the top of my head. So yeah, I mean, it has to be. It has to be one of the longest. I mean, I don't see how it could not be.
253. That's long.
Yeah, that's long.
I'm sure you probably felt it when you were reading as well. Is that fair
I
to
did,
say?
and that's not a criticism. It's just a function of reality. With with running my own website and full time job, and reading the other manga I'm just reading for pleasure and such. That's a big old watermelon to have to take a bite out of right there. It's just a big story. It's longer than Rurouni Kenshin, the entire series.
Yeah.
Yes, it's long.
It's long. It's a beast. So yeah, once again, thank you for getting through it. I'm looking forward to discussing it. Just stats off the top. It did run from 2005 to 2010. So you're talking about 6 years pretty much of being ongoing in Weekly Shonen Jump. The context is Rukia has been saved from Soul Society. Ichigo is back in the world of the living. And Aizen has been revealed as the big bad. But what does Aizen want to do? We shall find out. This is the arc where Aizen is controlling. You were seeing Aizen's plan play out, and Ichigo's continuing his journey, figuring out himself and his place in all this. So yeah, I'm going to kick it off. We're going to start with the Arrancar Invasion section. This, even though it is going to be, we're going to do this by sub arcs. Feel free to chime in, reference things that happen later. It is all one connected story. There was a part of me that was tempted to have you read half of it and half of it later, but I think having the full context of knowing how it ends and reveals that come later and how things all connect together, I think that's probably the better way to do that. So we might jump around, and like Enzo said on the Rurouni Kenshin episode, everything is spoilers at this point. We're more than halfway through this big chunk of the series, so yes, we'll be going into detail. So the main major thing with the Arrancar Invasion section, which is essentially everything that happens in the world of the living at the first quarter of this arc, is we have the introduction of two new groups, which is the Arrancars and the Vizards. So these are like the opposite ends of the spectrum of this idea of where the Shinigami and the Hollow, one becoming the other. The Arrancar go on this journey of Hollows who were once humans, in fact, but becoming human-ish Shinigamis with that meld of powers that they have. The Vizards, in comparison, are introduced as this outcast group of Shinigami who delved into tainted hollow powers, which does get revealed in its more detail later on. I think fair to say that Shinji is kind of the representative of the Vizards to the audience, and then someone like Ulquiorra is the representative to the Arrancars. So, Enzo, as a more general question, I was curious, what was your, knowing that this was a big beast of an arc, did you have any expectations? What were your thoughts going in? And then when these two concepts were kind of became quite the focus, what was your initial impressions?
Well, my initial impression is before I knew why they got their name, I kept calling them the Viso Reds in my head. But I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense. The Viso Red isn't a thing. But that would be how I guess you would pronounce it in Japanese. But anyway, they're the Vizards. And I also find it very interesting. And I guess I didn't realize that I'm just dealing with housekeeping kind of stuff here, but I didn't realize there were actually, this even started like in even in earlier arcs, but all these Spanish language terminology and names. It's interesting. And in this arc, of course, it's omnipresent. These Spanish language, it really like the whole Arrancar. In fact, Arrancar itself is a Spanish language word. So it's very interesting. I knew it was huge, and I knew it was Bleach. And I kind of had an expectation of Bleach after reading the first two main arcs that we've already covered, but especially Soul Society arc. It's very it is very much a product of its essence. There's not a lot of extra accoutrements visually or story wise. It's very directed. It's very to the point. I think that that's a characteristic of Kubo as a writer. Not that I've read any of his other works, but judging by Bleach, I would say it's very much a characteristic of him that he knows what's important and he writes what's important. And so I was kind of like, with a lot of arcs, with big arcs in a lot of shonen, there are a lot of like ups and downs and peaks and valleys and fast paced and slow paced. And it kind of like bends in a river. This one is it's relatively consistent from the beginning. It's pretty intense and it doesn't really ever stop. And at least that's my perception looking back on having read it. It just feels like it doesn't come at you in waves. It comes at you like a river. It just keeps flowing all the time. It's not like 253 chapters and 110 of them are reflective slice of life set up. It's not really like that. It's 253 chapters of action, pretty much. At least that's how it feels to me, just having read it.
Knowing what you do know about this arc, from what you said in Soul Society, which I found fascinating because it differed from maybe the general consensus. You place Kubo as more of an architect than a gardener in terms of a storyteller, because Soul Society was quite structured and it was all built around this ultimate reveal and multiple storylines coming together by the end, which clearly had to be planned. Did you
Right.
do you still feel the same with Arrancar, or do you think he found himself going in directions as he went?
I still feel he's pretty architectural, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't feel structurally that Arrancar is hugely different from Soul Society. In fact, one of the things I walked away from this arc thinking is I thought he intentionally paralleled Soul Society at times in this arc. I thought he was doing it on purpose, actually trying to like make contrast. Like, yes, I'm going to repeat this, but here's what I'm going to tweak. So I not only do I feel that it's structurally pretty consistent with Soul Society, I think at points that I think there are parts of this arc where he's literally intentionally rehashing parts of Soul Society, but in a different with the details changed. I think he's doing it on purpose. Whether I'm just completely talking out of my ass there, I don't know. But that was what I felt like when I was reading it.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, especially since you're reading it in bulk, I think reading Bleach weekly, unless you're totally bought into it and you're a fan, you could probably imagine reading it. Sometimes you read a chapter and you're like, "Oh, that took a minute. That took a minute and a half." Like, it kind of speeds by. So I think it leads to readers sometimes feeling like Kubo's pulling things out of his ass, but You do. I agree with you. When you understand the big picture, you can kind of see how it feels intentional. And yeah, I was going to touch on the. We'll definitely touch on points where it mirrors Soul Society because I think that is just very clear and very obvious. Um, it does start with a bang, and it kind of keeps going from there. These are not concepts that he just invented on the spot either, because very early on in both arcs, funny story. Shinji appears in the lead color spread of chapter 1 of Bleach. He's a little square.
Really?
Um, yep, you can see him. Exact same hair, everything. So clearly, he was a character he intended to maybe introduce in the first arc, but that was a case as well where editors kind of pushed him to take the story somewhere else, and he got to Soul Society faster than he would have intentionally, by his own decision. So yes, Shinji was always going to be there, and as well in the manga. This didn't happen in the anime, I believe, but when Grand Fisher was defeated in the first arc by Ichigo, you see him go back to Hueco Mundo, and he goes through the beginning of an Arrancar transformation. Yeah, that is not shown in the anime, I believe, but that is something quite early in the manga. So
Can
the
I ask
first
a
thing I want to
question? Is there a specific reason, backstory, why he chooses to go with Spanish names for all this stuff, or does he just think
I
it
think
sounds cool?
I think that is part of it. It's worth noting that in all the chapter titles, the pages he does for every chapter, um, he writes them in English as well. They're not translated into English. Uh, every group slash race of characters that are explored here and throughout the series beyond this point are pretty much associated with a language. Like the Quincy's, for example, you've seen with Uryu, maybe that's German. Soul Society is very clearly just Japanese, and then anything to do with the hulls and the Rancor is Spanish, and that recurring thread that goes throughout the series. So I think he just
Okay.
likes to create, as well as like a visual, a distinct visual for each group. He will go further into how he fleshes out their identity, I suppose.
I think stylistic aesthetic is very important to him as a writer. I think that it's something he's very
Definitely.
conscious of, very aware of, because he does not draw backgrounds to speak of. He doesn't express the style through background art and such. I think that kind of stylistic touch is essential to him because that's the place where he can express it. Because he doesn't do it through, this is not Vagabond, you know, this is not that sort of series. This is not Elusive Samurai or Assassination Classroom. This is a very simple, straightforward visual style. So the way he expresses style is the way he expresses aesthetic is quite different than the way most shonen mangaka do. Not that Vagabond
And
is
I
a
think
shonen, but you get my point.
And I think as well, if you ever look up Kubo just on Google, look at images of him. This is a man who dresses extravagantly as well. It's very in character with who he is. And yeah, it's a general consensus among fans, watchers, readers of Bleach that if Kubo wasn't a mangaka, he'd probably be a fashion designer or something. In every color spread, he has the characters just like dripped out to the highest degree, style visually, but then also in terms of like the world building and things like that are very, very. That's where he feels comfortable um, as an artist. Yeah, I was going to kick off then about touching on Grand Fisher. One of the key first opening moments of this arc is Grand Fisher returns as an Arrancar. And what happens? We have Isshin Kurosaki coming to save the day. Enzo, I know when we discussed him in the first arc, you said you weren't a big fan of him. I kept my lips sealed and was like, went as much as I feel I could. Turns out there is more to this man than the act he puts on, which is not to say that you can't feel annoyed by the act he does put on. I think that's very fair. But yeah, fair to say you were surprised with this development.
No, I didn't see it coming. No, I absolutely did not see it coming. And it is interesting. I mean, it does paint his character in a different light. And of course, I liked him better in this arc because his role in the story is his role in the first two arcs is basically to be an annoying putz, pretty much. I mean, when you get right down to it, that's his role in the story. He's a butt monkey. His role in this arc is to be it's significant and it's important, and he's still an annoying butt monkey, but he becomes, you sort of get the background on it and why he is the way he is, and he's just much more relevant. And I think context makes a big difference with him, and I certainly feel more favorably disposed towards him after Arrancar than I did before. And I did not see that twist coming with him. It doesn't make him one of my favorite characters, but certainly it does change your view of him for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it shifts the perception of him to being an ignorant annoyance to someone who is consciously giving Ichigo the space to do what he needs to do. For a character of his age, it adds more maturity to him and makes him more serious, while still allowing him to be this sense of comic relief in contrast to Ichigo being the straight man.
And it makes me wonder about Ichigo's sisters too. Even though nothing is revealed in Arrancar, but it makes me wonder about them too, because it's like, Jesus, the whole family in on this? They sure don't act like it, but who knows?
Yeah, and it also makes you think Ichigo being a Shinigami doesn't come from absolutely nowhere. So, yeah, it all ties together. And I think what I love about this moment in particular is that it allows Isshin to provide the closure with Masaki's death, which Grand Fisher, as we saw in the flashback in the first arc. So Ichigo had that moment with Grand Fisher as a very early villain to fight against, and now Isshin, with his powers suddenly returned, he's able to enact his own revenge. So I think that was very gratifying and a good reintroduction to his character, the character he actually is. So yeah, I'm glad that had a positive effect on you as well. Other characters we get introduced to, I touched on them already, is the Vizards. So in this section of the story, Ichigo is in his fight with Byakuya. His hollow powers were coming out, and he was fighting between letting himself succumb to it and use that power in battle, but he's still trying to resist it, even though it's increasing and growing. So when you're introduced to Shinji and the Vizards, who have a similar power and similar struggles that they've dealt with, it feels, it's a perfect moment for them to come together. So Ichigo ends up training with them. I wanted to just get your opinion on the Vizards as they were introduced. Do you have any favorites? They're quite a eclectic, weird bunch. It's almost Phantom Troupish.
Spiders?
There's not there's like not a uniformity in their visual aesthetic, which kind of makes them feel thrown together a little bit when they're first introduced. They're a zany bunch, so I'm just curious if there were any that stuck out to you.
Hachi. Yeah, he's the one I immediately liked because he sticks out more than any of them. But I really liked him. I liked that I liked his vibe. I like that he's kind of a very he has a very like Earth Mothery kind of a presence to him. He's very stable. He's very grounded. He's a healer. He's a stabilizer. He's a protector. He stands out because this is a series that's full of big talking, snarky kind of badass types, and he's the opposite of that. He's just a big, calm, self-deprecating, quiet but quietly firm but resolute, strong guy. And I think his character design is really interesting too, with with that huge body and that porn star stash, and he's yeah, well, I don't know. I was reading it in black and white.
Sure.
Yeah, I think he's great. Does he have pink hair in the anime, Hachi?
He has.
Or are you
he
joking?
Has pink hair. Yeah. No, I'm not joking. He has pink hair.
Fuck me. I think that's an odd choice, but
you have so much to learn when you eventually see things animated. Yeah. It's going to be fun.
But as I told you, I see Bleach in black and white, and I don't want to see it in color, because to me this is a series that presents itself in black and white, and not in the way that manga normally. I mean, manga are obviously primarily in black and white, but I even though the main character's name is Strawberry, I just feel like black and white is. I feel like that's Kubo's palette. I mean, that's his, that's his natural aesthetic. And that's how I want to envision the series. I did not envision Hachi with pink hair. I didn't need to know that he has pink hair. I was happier not knowing that he has pink hair. But I still like him. I think he's great. Generally speaking, the Vizards, the Viso Reds, as I call them, I enjoyed them. I kind of knew all along they were going to be allies in the end, but that's fine. I think that was kind of intentionally telegraphed. I don't think that was supposed to be a big shock. So yeah, I liked them. I thought they were an interesting group. The snarky girl, whose name starts with an H, but I've forgotten her name.
Hiyori.
Yeah. Now, spoiler to our listeners, there's like 350 characters introduced in Arrancar. It's crazy how many characters there are. I do not
as many
remember
chapters
all their
there
names. Yes, and at least 253 characters. I do not remember a lot of names, and I'm not going to make any pretense about it. But yes, Hiyori, that's her name. There are a couple characters I distinctly remember because they made a big impression on me, and Hachi is one of them.
Nice. It's funny how I agree with you that Bleach works best in black and white. I look forward to if you do watch the anime if we get to that point. But and the other thing as well is you are reading the volume releases, which also are monochromatic versions of the color spreads, of which there are loads. So you're even limited in terms of seeing, like, when Kubo did use color, I suppose. So
yeah,
maybe I should follow up with some color spreads and blow your mind with the color designs that these characters have.
I'd be very interested in seeing that.
My favorite of the Vizards is a bit of a niche one. I really resonate with Mashiro. She's the one that kind of looks like a Kamen Rider. You wouldn't know this. She has green hair. She is she's like the spunky one who was able to use her mask the longest of everyone. She's always like annoying the other ones, I think. Yeah, she's got a nice zany personality, which describes the group as a whole. For me, there was never a point where like, oh, these are the villains. It was just, even with Shinji as being introduced, he likes to play into that, but he never feels evil or dastardly. He just feels like a bit of a goof playing a role.
Yep.
So yeah. As well, I would touch on Hachi. He's one of the early characters. We did see it in the end of Soul Society with Unohana, who is the captain of the healing squad, 4th Division. She noticed that there was something about Orihime's healing at the end of Soul Society. There was like a panel where she's watching it happen and like, this looks strange. Which is then connected here when Hachi sees there's something about Orihime's power which feels different. And I think this is all kind of building up to what eventually becomes way more important in this overall arc. And so he was one of those characters to, I think, highlight that in the early stage, which I liked. It was just his moments with Orihime as well were quite charming when she got involved with them for a little bit. But the main part with the Vizards was that Ichigo has his training. So he's struggling with his hollow identity, which we can call white for now, to separate him. There's white and then there's Zangetsu inside of his head. And he's kind of succumbing to this, but learning how he can weaponize it without it taking control of him. This comes in the form of this mask that the Vizards all use that represent their powers. Fun little detail, I don't know if you noticed this, but as Ichigo goes throughout the arc, every time he uses the mask, it actually changes design. I don't know if you clocked that, but
I didn't.
I think that's kind of... Yeah, so it's a very minor detail. The design changes almost every time, especially from Hueco Mundo onwards, where I think mirrors his journey of becoming closer to his hollow or closer to controlling it, I suppose. So, just what Kubo may not be super interested in world building from laying out everything, every detail for the reader. He's very interested in how he can make things interesting to him as an artist and just look cool. So I think that's a very cool feature that separates them visually from the rest of the cast. Yeah, I personally really like the section that happens with Ichigo inside of his head fighting with his hollow. One of the major themes I feel with Bleach is self-acceptance of one's identity, accepting that. So this is something that we see heavily with Ichigo struggling with throughout this whole arc. Fair to say, when we read Soul Society, you kind of mentioned that Ichigo didn't resonate as much with you. He felt quite like a fitting main character, but maybe not there was much depth to him. That's a fair reading as well. This time, in Arrancar. I feel like we really get to see more of what Ichigo is struggling with. He still has this desire to protect everyone, but this need to protect and not have things go wrong, clashing with this uncontrollable thing about himself that he's trying to hold back. I think this is a much more interesting arc for Ichigo, the journey he goes on, than what he did in Soul Society, which leans more into the cool, the badass, the battle shonen like essence, I suppose. Do you agree with that? Did you feel any more fondness for Ichigo this time around?
Yes, I still think there are more interesting characters in this story to me. Um, to be honest, I one of the things I struggle with is I feel like there are times when Kubo uses irreverence as a bit of a crutch. He tends to undercut serious moments with irreverence, like yeah, like he does it serially. I mean, it's just something that's you just come to accept it as part of the fabric of the story. I think with Ichigo, he's certainly often an example of this, but there are more examples in this arc of him, because I think he spends a lot of this arc not even literally, although literally in the section you mentioned, but also kind of symbolically, he spends a lot of this arc in his own head, and I think that inherently makes him more compelling as a character because he doesn't need to put on that front that he puts on when he's dealing with other people, and I feel like in a sense, his Kubo's writing of him as a character kind of just relaxes a little bit when he's dealing with himself and rather than dealing with other people. So yes, I do think he is more kind of overall effective in this arc for mainly that reason. I still don't find him to be like an absolutely gripping, super fascinating, empathetic main character. I still feel like he's more of a fulcrum for the story than he is just a thematic engine. But I mean, maybe this is my misread of it, but I kind of feel like that's kind of the way the story is designed. So I don't think that's necessarily any kind of a criticism. I just feel like that's his role more or less. But on balance, anytime you see a character forced to confront his own demons, I think that has the potential to make him more engaging and more compelling as a character, and I think that's definitely the case with Ichigo in this arc.
I think Ichigo in this arc as well, this is even more so than Soul Society. He wants to take on as much burden as he can. And because he carries so much of that, I think that's why you see things manifest in quite an ugly, negative way as the arc goes on. So yeah, it's for me that's part of his ongoing journey of self acceptance. His inner hollow is an inverted version of himself. So I think that's very cool visually, but I like that contrast that they have. They're like opposite personalities. His inner hollow, White, he talks about the king falling off his horse. He views himself as that horse, the thing that is carrying him along. But if he can't respect Ichigo to let him sit upon him and use him in the way he wants, he's not going to let him. He might be the beast, but he still has that control and that power over him if he so wishes. So, yeah, I find it interesting how Ichigo has to teeter this line of using this side of himself while not wanting to be succumbing to it.
Kind of like Kenshin with the Batosai.
Exactly. I have more notes on that later, but another key character, I think fair to say, in the Arrancar arc as a whole is Orihime. In many ways, that Soul Society mirrors Arrancar. Would you say that Orihime is the Rukia of this arc?
She certainly has a much more interesting and compelling role to play in this arc than she did in Soul Society.
Sure.
She's a very crucial character, and Rukia is she's just frankly less important here. She's not as integral to the story as she was in Soul Society, where she was basically the MacGuffin for the whole conflict, really. So, and here Orihime, we talked about the damsel in distress factor with Rukia in Soul
Yeah.
Society. I do think there is an element of that with Orihime in this arc too, to be blunt.
Yep.
But she definitely has a lot to do. She is kind of a conventional anime sound effect hot chick, and she gets used that way a lot. Where it's very, her curvature and all that is very prominently like part of her whole design. But she's not a passenger. In fact, I would say she's less of a passenger in this arc than Rukia is for much of Soul Society, if that's fair. I think I would say is a true statement. She is more proactive. She's more directly involved in her own fate. In the end, she
Mm.
is mostly a damsel in distress, but I think she has more direct involvement in what happens to her here, which I think is a positive.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, they were in, slightly different details of their situation and being locked up, but you definitely get more of a sense of how Orihime is trying to navigate it for herself. I think one thing that I like is Orihime mirrors Ichigo in so many ways of her trying to not burden anyone with things going wrong. She's like, okay, if I let myself be the one taken, if I remove myself from the situation, that is better for everyone else. So
Mm.
it's that similar way of thinking which drives the whole arc, but also like brings Ichigo and Orihime closer together because that is kind of in conflict between them. Um, I I said this before. Orihime is one of my favorite characters. Throughout Bleach, when it was running, she was hated on enormously. I think she
Yeah, I don't get
represents.
that really.
From I do agree with you said that from a visual level, she's drawn as a very like busty, attractive girl. Um, I think there are much more egregious cases of objectifying characters and not having them have any agency or characters themselves. I think, like you said, Orihime, she she has a character of her own and she has her own desires. So that's not robbed of her. Yeah, there are parts early on in this arc which I really appreciate. The Soul Society characters do get reintroduced to the story as unbelievable high school students, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's an iconic scene of Rukia appearing at the window as well. That very much like feels like early Bleach, which some people really cling on to. And one of those characters that joins them, which I think is intentional on Kubo's part. Kubo kind of brings in these more like lieutenants, these side characters who he can have more freedom with, who are not so constrained. Throw in Toshiro Hitsugaya there, who I think he likes to play the contrast of him being the senior one in charge, who's the little boy that everyone kind of mocks. But yeah, Rangiku, I see Rangiku and Orihime as quite similar characters. Where if you look at them, just on first impressions, you would think they're one side type of character, but there's more to them. I think Rangiku in particular, there's some it's very minor moments, but she stays with Orihime for a time before everything goes down properly. And you get a real sisterly bond between them, which does maybe get undercut by them being naked in the bath scene together.
Yes.
Um, I think for what the characters are saying to each other, what they represent for one another. Orihime, who's been alone like her whole life since her abusive parents and her brother turning into a hollow. I think, yeah, that's a very touching, tender dynamic that is kind of um, quite minor, but I still remember very fondly.
She has a
And
little
then
bit of a
other,
sister thing with Rukia too. Orihime and Rukia, don't they have a little bit of that vibe too for a while there before
yeah,
Rengoku comes into the story?
yeah, there is big. It's a fandom thing, Ichigo and Rukia versus Ichigo or Hime. I think often as a result of that, you see fans of Rukia and Orihime pitting the characters against each other, when in reality, those characters really like each other and
Yeah, yeah, totally.
they speak up for the other and they encourage Ichigo to save the other. There's not a like weird feeling between them. So yeah, I agree with that. There is like a sisterly relationship with Rukia. But Orihime is also wrestling with the fact that she has these feelings for Ichigo, but she can see that Ichigo and Rukia have this bond, this closeness, which feels different than what she has with him. So she does have that internal struggle, I suppose, of does it make her feel uncomfortable? Yes, but she never is fueled by the jealousy to like sabotage them or anything, which I think just all folds back into Orihime just being like a lovely person to her own detriment sometimes, I think. But the major revelation comes with more details that come of Orihime's power, which comes revealed alongside when we learn Aizen's goal. His overall scheme is to get to the royal palace, which is this realm beyond Soul Society. He needs a key to get there, the Okin. So he's trying to create this with use of the Hogyukyu, the object that he got at the end of Soul Society. And yeah, he wants to overthrow the Soul King. And Orihime can be a part of his plan because, as it turns out, she's not just healing things, she is rejecting phenomenon. She is it's not even just time reversal, it's just changing the reality of something within a space, which in of itself is incredibly broken. A lot of people like to say that if Orihime was any other sort of personality, you could like power skill her to be one of the strongest characters in the series, probably. She doesn't. So yeah, she's a sweetheart with this potentially dangerous power, which Aizen wants to use for himself. Yeah, as I touched on earlier, Ilkura is one of the first representatives that we see of the Arrancar, and he is tasked with taking Orihime to Hueco Mundo. This leads up to a big moment where Orihime, she's kind of given a false choice, but she's given the chance to depart, so not to make things suspicious, not to make it look like she was kidnapped, rather. She has the chance to make it seem like she's just running away. She's fleeing from everyone, and that doesn't make it seem like Aizen or Hueco Mundo or the Arrancars are part of this scheme. And that builds up to this moment where she decides to spend her last day in the world of living and goes to Ichigo's room. As someone who likes Ichigo and who really, really likes Orihime a lot, and I'm quite fond of them together, this is one of my favorite chapters in the series, I think. It's just a really tender, sweet, sad moment where she has that moment where she wants to kiss Ichigo farewell and she wants to part ways with him, but she knows that it doesn't feel right and this isn't the way that she wants things to play out. She's trying to do this to not have Ichigo feel guilt, to remove herself from this situation. And she says, like a lovely line, which a lot of Orihime fans quote a lot, which is that she wished she lived 5 lives. You know, she wished she was a baker. She wished she did all these things. She had all these careers and had all these different lives. But in all of those 5 lives, she would have fallen in love with the same person each time. Kubo doesn't go too heavy on the romance in the series, which is, I think, pretty typical for Battle Shonen. But I think this is one where he channels it very tenderly through Orihime. So, yeah, what did you think? Did you have any thoughts on this moment? Her version of Rukia being taken to Soul Society, I suppose.
What I remember from that is she also says in that scene in her 5 lives that one of them would be go to 31 flavors and get one of each, and then go to Mr. Donut in another life and get one of each. And I thought that was kind of very charming. That was kind of a nice moment when she said those things. So yeah, I do remember. There's a lot of chapters here and a lot of moments. Some of them don't stand out in my memory nearly as much as others, and I do remember that. And I think it ties in with this theme of that is a great line, and it does tie in with this theme of her, even though she's being manipulated into doing this. You know, at least the illusion is that she's more in control of her situation than Rukia was. Now, the flip side of it is, as you say, this is all kind of a setup, and it's in this illusion of control is being quite intentionally created, but it still feels in the moment like she has more agency than Rukia did. So I think that is an important distinction. But yes, I remember that chapter very, very distinctly. It is one of the chapters from this massive behemoth of an arc that does kind of remain sort of distinct in and of itself as something that stands out in my memory for sure.
And that kind of leads on to the final section of this arc where Ichigo just feels like something's wrong. He doesn't trust it. At the same time, Yamamoto pulls out everyone from the world of the living because they're anticipating the battle that's going to come with Aizen, and it's no longer a priority to have those characters. So everyone gets pulled out. It's all dramatic. Ichigo feels like he's being left behind, and he takes it upon himself to, like he did with Soul Society, go to Urahara. And another rescue arc is going to proceed from there. Yeah, I think that just about wraps up the Arrancar Invasion part of the story. Unless Enzo, you have any other comments of this section?
No. I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly.
I think what we can do then, because this is essentially one long arc with four arcs within it. If you're up for it, we can give a rating for each little section. We don't need to go in detail. We can just power through, and then we can give the total arc of the whole Arrancar saga, I suppose.
Let me just say for the record, I had not prepared myself to individually score each arc, so this is completely coming in the moment for me. So
I would give this section a 93. I think it's a good introduction to this arc, the concepts of it, and the beginning of establishing the focus of Ichigo, Orihime, as well as just giving new context to characters that we'd already been established before. Yeah, I think it's a very strong start for what is a behemoth to come.
Okay, I'm gonna go 80. I think this arc feels overall, in my estimation, pretty contiguous with Soul Society. I don't remember what score I gave that, but I feel like it was probably right in that range. So I'm going to go 80.
Yeah. Well, in that case, let's jump over to Hueco Mundo. That'll be the second part of this episode here. And
okay.
Yeah, one comment that you had left was a featureless white desert. Comments on that?
Oh, well, it's just, I mean, how could there be anything more perfectly Kubo than a featureless white desert? Because he doesn't, he doesn't draw backgrounds anyway. So it's like so when they're describing this place, when they get to it, it's like, well, this is, I mean, you couldn't find anything more Kubo than that. It's a featureless white desert. It gives him an excuse to draw, exactly what he wants to draw, which is a featureless white desert with people in it. So that was my only reason. It just struck me funny that as soon as we got there and it was being described, it's just like, okay, he's found his natural habitat. Good for him.
Yeah, that's funny as well that you noted that. You're not the first person to say that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's funny because yes, I think he's doing it because he doesn't like drawing backgrounds. That's not his That's not his interest, rather. But you can also link it thematically to being, I suppose, about when you compare it to Soul Society, which has more of an established feudal society that it operates by. This place feels more animalistic. That although Aizen has created structure within his own section, it's like barren and representative of these hollows, which are essentially beasts that don't have the structure within them. So yeah, Kubo can have it in both ways. He can make it make sense, and he can make it work for him as an artist.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Maybe this is a good point as well to touch on. You said it before, but maybe you felt it even more so as you read along. Just how minimalistic the series is. Yeah, do you have any more thoughts? Not even just this section, but I suppose in general.
I don't think it is so much specific to Hueco Mundo. I think it's more just, I think it is the whole series, but it's this arc as a whole. It just really makes me think. I don't remember another series that is so stripped down to its bare essentials as Bleach. It's just like, it's minimalist to the point of exaggeration almost. Now, that is to say, it has a very intricate storyline. It has a shit ton of characters. So, I mean, there's clearly a lot of a lot of intelligent design that goes into it. It's very structured. It has a lot of plot. It has a lot of characters, but there's not a lot of anything extraneous to it. Not visually, not thematically. Everything is just kind of it is sort of linear. I think it's fair to say, and I just find that to be really interesting. That's just my take on it. I mean, I feel when I'm reading, most big action series, that there's much more other things, more layers, more visually, tonally. There's a lot of stuff that just kind of happens for the sake of adding color, not in the literal sense, but in the narrative sense. And I feel like Kubo's writing very much matches his art. He's a very minimalist creator of fiction. He writes. He has something he wants to say. He says it. He has something he wants to do. It gets done. It takes a long time sometimes to get there. 253 chapters is a lot of chapters in one arc, but that's because there's so many things happening. It's like 252 chapters of core and one chapter of fluff. And in most manga, if you had a 253 chapter arc, you'd have like 202 chapters of core and 51 chapters of fluff or something like that. And that's just not how it is with Bleach. At least that's how it plays to me. And if anything, I would say that's kind of the defining characteristic for me of Bleach as a series is minimalism. If you ask me one word that comes to mind when I think of Bleach, now having read through the first 300 odd chapters of it, it's minimalist. That's the thing that immediately springs to mind to me, and there's no other word that's competing with it. Now, if you let me think about it and talk about it as we're doing here, there's a lot of other words that are going to come up. But if you ask me for that kind of instant reaction, that word association, minimalism, that's the word that immediately springs to mind. And it's not so much that it's different in Hueco Mundo or indeed in Arrancar as a whole. It's just that because I think of the sheer scale of this arc and how big it is, it really calls into mind that he's creating something this huge and there's no fluff in it. It's all part of the essential skeletal structure of the series. At least that's how it is for me.
No, I love that, and I think that ties into what you said of you see the series in black and white. Why would this need color? Like
Exactly. Color just confuse things. It's not necessary. I don't want to see Citizen Kane in color. Are you old enough to remember that fad that happened when they started colorizing black and white movies, and a lot of old classics got colorized, and there was
no, but I
like
know
this
they
brief.
do. I know there's like AI versions of that nowadays as well.
Well, this was even pre AI, and
Okay.
there was like this little stretch at the beginning. Google kids in the audience, Google colorized movies, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And there was like this little stretch at the beginning where everyone was like, "Wow, this is such a cool thing," and then it took maybe a year or 2 years, and then the general consensus was, "This is an atrocity. Stop." And because Citizen Kane was meant to be viewed in black and white. Now, admittedly, Orson Welles shot Citizen Kane in black and white because he made that film in 1939, and that's how most movies in 1939 were shot. But uh, and there's nothing wrong with color films. There's nothing wrong with manga that make you think in color, and anime. I mean, I don't think of, even when I'm reading the manga, I don't think of Hunter x Hunter in black and white. I think of it in color. I think of Bleach as black and white, and I feel that that's because of the nature of Kubo's writing and his art.
And I suppose, yeah, it's a funny relationship to have that sort of those be the descriptions of the series when that's just not how you would think a battle shonen would operate. Now, no less one of the most popular battle shonen of all time. So yeah, it's definitely it separates Kubo's artistic approach from the pack in that way. And
Let me just say Citizen Kane, by the way, 1941, not 1939, before anyone corrects me.
yeah, and I think another part which plays into this as well, which is something that I really did not realize until it was mentioned semi recently on Twitter when I saw someone was rereading the series. Bleach almost never has a narrator. I think if they do, you can probably count it in one hand, and it's maybe like a panel or two introducing a concept or something like that. So, in the same way that it feels stripped back in that way, there is no there's no like authoritative voice telling you this is happening, this is what this character feels. Kubo like really he goes deep on internal monologues, but you're always, I suppose, left with this feeling of you have to trust this is what the character thinks. If that is what you're supposed to think, or if that character is wrong in their assumption, then that's the way it is. So yeah, when I
Yeah,
came to
that's
that
an
conclusion,
interesting
I was like,
observation. Yeah.
yeah, when I came to that conclusion, I was like, damn, I really didn't realize about Bleach. There's no third objective voice to it, which I think is very cool.
Let me,
Yeah.
before you move on, I want to just this because this question just popped into my head, and it's just a quickie. If so, think back on all of the what we call the kaiju shonen series, all the big ones, the real big ones. You pick one of that group, past, present, whatever, 1980s, 2020s, whenever you like, that you would say is the most opposite of Bleach, just generally in terms of this aesthetic we're talking about, this minimalism, this lack of the authoritative, voice, the whole thing. Pick one series. What series do you think is the most anti-minimalist, or in any other way is the most different from Bleach?
One Piece.
Among the kaiju. One Piece. Okay. I can totally see that.
Because I'm really glad that you worded it the way you did, because a lot of people would say nothing happens in Bleach. It's being made up as it goes along. It's a very common criticism, but I think you worded it perfectly. Everything that's happening is intentional. It's just Kubo values how he presents that page by page, and he's not going to cram himself into little panels to get something across that he wants to like be a standout moment. He will spend a page on something that Oda would spend half a panel on a corner of a double spread.
Right.
So I think people sometimes they view it as like, oh, this was a waste of my time, or amount of information per page count. I don't think it gets much different from One Piece to Bleach in that way.
Okay. Yeah, I find it interesting that my interpretation of Bleach, as someone who came to it late, seems to be the direct diametrically opposite of what the general zeitgeist is from in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
but it is what it is.
So yeah, to get more into this Hueco Mundo section, then, yeah, I agree. Especially here, this feels like a direct mirror to Soul Society. He's exploring these similar concepts, and again, this is a critique of the series where people will be like, he's just recycling the storyline. I'm more with you. I think he's recycling it with intention. He's clearly he liked what he did with Soul Society, and he's like, okay, what if I did this, but then this thing happened instead? What if like it branched out in an alternate direction? So there are things that do feel there are characters definitely that feel like they're functioning in the same capacity. So Ichigo and Cole going to save the day via Urahara to go to this new realm. There being this structure of the villains that they need to fight against. The damsel in distress, Rukia to Orihime. I think even down to the two, Ichigo's two personal villains, rivals for this arc being Grimjo and Ulquiorra. I feel like Renji is Grimjo, Byakuya is Ulquiorra. There's a lot of personality similarities and like things that seem to slot in nicely and neatly. That I think it doesn't shock me that someone thinks that it's a like not very creative way to explore this arc. But yeah, I do think it's about how he takes this, and like, for example, Ichigo in the Soul Society arc, he powered through his enemies, he won every battle, and it was it was that sort of escalation, whereas he's flipped it the other way. The whole time he's struggling. He's struggling with like not giving too much, like he's trying to like hold on to himself. I think fair to say it's a critique, but it sounds like maybe you that didn't weigh too heavily on you as a critique, and it was more just an observation
Well, no,
structurally. Is that right?
because I thought he was doing it on purpose. So I mean, why would
Yeah.
I mean, I think he made a story choice that he wanted to re-explore uh, Soul Society, but with these tweaks to make it
Yeah.
play differently. I'm not going to say it totally worked for me in every way because it didn't, but as a concept,
Mm.
I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't think it was lazy. I think he was making a very intentional decision to do it, which is completely valid. And I would
Okay.
also say, just for the record, I think that Ichigo, I think he's less central to events in this arc than he is in Soul Society on balance.
Mm.
He's still the main character. He's still the protagonist. He's still, when the final battle comes, he's going to be, at the center of it. But there's more stuff going on independent of his direct involvement this time than there was last time, I would say. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, I suppose that maybe comes down to his failure rate was higher this time than his success rate. So things were happening in contrast to him like trying to stop things occurring. So yeah, and things were there was a larger cast of characters doing things without him involved. So I agree with that. Now I do love Bleach, but I will admit there is a part of Hueco Mundo which is my least favorite stretch in the entire series. That is with the Priver on Espada. This is when Ichigo, Uryu, and Chad get paired off with these Espadas who once were. They're rejected and they have lower numbers now. Yeah, that's not great in the anime. It's very, very long and extended. And ironically, of the three, I would actually say Chad's fight is probably my favorite. But yeah, this is where I can put my hand up and be like, this is my critique. I think this is probably the most boring part of Bleach.
Okay.
But I wanted to say, in contrast, talked about the Vizards already. To go more into the Arrancars, we have the Espada, who are the villains of this arc. They're the lackeys of Aizen, Gin, and Tozen. They, like I said, they are hollows who become more human, Shinigami-esque through use of the Hokuku, where they have this. They become more humanized and gain a sword and have this resurrection ability, which feels like a bastardized version of what the Zanpakuto and the Shinigami have. So yeah, when they use their resurrection, they become much more beastly, more representative of what they once were. So yeah, that's kind of what he's going with here. I was wondering on what are you feeling on the Espada as a villain group as a whole, and do you have any favorites from then? Any particular characters that
Uh,
resonated?
are we talking about all the Espada here, even the ones that come up a little bit later? You want me to talk about
Yeah,
favorites
go for
among the
it.
whole group? Well,
Go for it.
first of all, the bit with the fallen Espada or whatever we call them, I didn't mind it. I mean, I didn't feel like I didn't. Maybe the anime fucked it up. I didn't feel like it felt like it dragged on forever in the manga. In fact, I kind of liked Dordoni. I thought he was. I don't know. He made me laugh.
Nino.
But my favorite of the Espada is definitely Nell.
Okay.
And she's not a villain in the sense that we think of the Espadas as being the big bads, but I really like Nell. And Nell is a funny character because she has like we said, it's all spoilers. The whole time Nell is in the story, she sort of starts off as being like this comic relief character, but then like literally like from the second chapter she's in, he's like, okay, when are we going to get to see like her true form and when is that going to happen? I knew it was going to happen. So when it happened, I was like, okay, finally. I was fine with it when it happened, but Nell is like this. She enters the story as like this cute little tiny girl, and she immediately like gloms onto Ichigo, and she even though, and she starts saying, "Oh, you're a villain, and every time she meets, every time she meets a Shinigami, she's like, "Baddie, baddie, baddie," because because she's an Espada, right? So she's as far from a threatening figure as you can imagine, and this is kind of the first indication we get that there may be more to this whole Espada thing than we were originally led to believe. That it's not a strictly straight up black and white good versus evil situation. She's also got these goofy quote unquote brothers who are they basically play like hardcore comic relief characters, which is for the most part they are. But I really like Nell. I don't know, from the beginning, the minute Nell appears, Nell makes me laugh. I really like Nell. I also like Coyote Stark, who
Oh yeah.
comes much later, but I really like Coyote Stark because he's like a totally identifiable guy. He also matches up against my favorite Shinigami too in their fights eventually. But I really like him because he's like an introverted guy, and he's not, he's basically like, why was I cursed with this massive power? I would be much happier just hanging out at home doing nothing with my girl, because he's got a soulmate, Lily Net or whatever. I don't know how you pronounce her name, but
Yeah.
so I liked him a lot. Generally speaking, I found the rest of them, there were ones I liked more than others. I think they're fine as a villain group. I mean, there's just, I think to me, the whole Espada thing suffers because there's so many of them and it goes on for so long, and it just, I just got battle fatigued after a while.
Mm.
And frankly, I found Grimjaw a lot to take. Specifically, I was just like, all right, we get it. He's like a walking shonen trope, and it's just like, I've had enough. I mean, it's like by the fifth time he comes around, and it's like, and he defies Aizen, and he's like, he makes it clear that this is all about, I want to, this is all about the personal thing for me, and it's just like, okay, we get it. Just give it a rest. I honestly, Grimjaw specifically, there were not a lot of Espadas that I was like, oh, I don't like this one. They annoy me. He kind of annoys me, to be honest. I
Yeah,
have to
he
be
doesn't.
honest.
He's
So
not your sort of character. He's not made for you.
no, he's not.
Just to answer my own question, then, I think my favorite is Ulquiorra. I think that's one of Kubo's better written characters, actually, in the series. I think he's quite contained to this arc, and his journey that he goes on of. Well, I should mention all these espadas have aspects of death to them, which we
Yeah,
learn later on as well. So I think in some ways the espadas feel maybe more one-dimensional because they are attributed to one aspect of death, which people theorize is the reason why they died and why they became a hollow and this journey that they went on. So I think that represents their personality. And Ulquiorra as being nihilism, you see him clearly represent that throughout this arc, and but also going on his own journey of understanding why people aren't like him. So I think character like Orihime, for example, is a brilliant contrast them together. So yeah, it's a lot of people ship them as well as a pairing. I think it's more just fascinating as a exercise of how can two diametrical opposite personalities influence the other and understand the other, I suppose. So yeah, Ulquiorra is probably um, my favorite.
yeah, I liked him. I thought he was good.
The other question I had then was, were you shocked when uh, A Nell was revealed as the previous Espada and that she was number 3, and also that Ulquiorra was only number
No.
4 because he was, for Ulquiorra, it seemed like he was being built up as the big bad underneath Aizen. He was Ichigo's foe. He was the one that people were being compared against. So that is a very defining moment in the series where, reaction YouTube, many a reaction of YouTube videos where people are surprised that Ulquiorra is only the 4th strongest of the batch, which is, very tropey in a shonen way. But
Yeah.
I thought that, yeah,
No, neither of those things really surprised me. Honestly, like I said, the minute Nell appeared, I was like, I mean, first of all, it's like, okay, she's funny. I like her. This is like, because she sticks out like a sore thumb. She's like totally different
yeah,
than anything else we've been seeing in the series, and I really like that. And then but like I said, by about the second chapter, I was like, okay, I know she's got like another form, and this is like there's some kind of like
There's more to her.
she's like yeah, she's been sealed or something. Yeah, and so I figured there's no way that he was going to go about building her up that much and giving her so many laugh lines and making her so cute if she wasn't a serious badass when she achieved her true form. So I figured when that happened, I mean, I didn't know, I didn't say, oh, I bet she's going to be number 3, but I said, no, she's going to be important and powerful and significant and like a serious badass once we find out who she really is. So no, that part didn't shock me, I have to say.
Other just points I would say before we wrap up this Hueco Mundo section. I'm all of the fights happening here. My favorite would be Rukia against Aaroniero. He is the number 9 Espada who, with his ability, he takes the form of Kai and Shiba, who we did see in the Soul Society flashback, where Rukia she dealt the killing blow to him as a result of the hollow which took over his body. We learned that Aaroniero consumed this hollow, thereby taking his abilities and being able to take Kaien's form. I think this is one of the fights that has less like back and forth action to it, but I think is my favorite focus on Rukia as a character. I think she has to confront herself in a lot of ways where she has regrets, and how Aaroniero weaponizes Kaien. And yeah, it's a believable outcome, I think, of a character like Rukia in this case, defeating someone who should be so much stronger than her, but she does it in a way which I think is written quite smartly, and it all works on a thematic level that closes this loop that this burden that she's carried with her. So yeah, I think that's one of my favorite fights of this section of Hueco Mundo. The only other ones I would mention as well is later on, when things are looking very dire. She's basically the only one who wins her fights. Everyone else is losing and not doing very good. Ichigo manages to take down Grimjo at one point, and then Soul Society comes to the rescue. Kenpachi, we have Mayuri, Unohana, and Byakuya. So they all come, they save the day. They're paired up with some Espada to take on what our main cast couldn't. And yeah, they kind of wrap things up. I will shout out, of course, the character that I'm going to shout out, which is Mayuri Kurotsuchi. As I said before, Mayuri is my favorite character in Bleach. One of Kubo's favorite characters to draw. Kubo cosplays him as well. I could go into it. But basically, I feel like Kubo has so much fun with Mayuri. Mayuri is a character, he's like Batman. He can do whatever he wants with him, and he can make it make sense, and he can break the rules, and he can have fun. And Mayuri, at this point, when we see him, having him be paired off with what he views as Szayel being a failed scientist, and this battle of the minds, Mayuri takes him down without ever even touching him, without really moving from a spot. I think just like such a nasty, cruel way to take him out, which is have him suffer 100 years of waiting for a sword to pierce your heart by like twisting your sense of time. I think Mayuri is a demented, twisted character who just is so engaging to read. And the moment where it clicked for me was after the fight, when he gives that speech on perfection. And Szayel whole thing is, I'm going to be this phoenix, this perfect form that's going to come from this. I'm the perfect scientist. And Mayuri, in a kind of stark contrast to how he acts, is like he despises that. He says he hates nothing more than perfection. Like a scientist should aspire to be anything but that. And I feel that is Kubo coming through as an artist, as a writer, and being like, he doesn't aspire for perfection either. And I think that isn't what we should aspire for as creators. We should try and do it the best we can, but never to feel that sense of being the absolute best, like being perfect in the output that we have. So yeah, I just remember when I experienced that speech, I was like, there's so much more to his character, which does get explored a little more in this arc. Curious if you can see a little bit more of why I like him so much.
I do, and I won't say that he impacts me the same way. But yeah, I get why you like him. He does represent sort of an amoralism, if you will, that's kind of intriguing. In a sense, he's kind of like the scariest character in the series, I would almost say, because he's a law unto himself. I think you get the sense that everything that he observes, everything that he sees, it's all part of his sense of experimentation, and that he's driven by curiosity, but not by any sense of right or wrong. And even though he's theoretically on the good guys team, um, does he feel heroic in any sense of the word? No. He kind of like saves the day here in a big way, but I think you get the sense that when he does something good, he's doing it because it's interesting. And if it wasn't interesting, he wouldn't bother doing it. If that makes sense.
No.
Which I do. So my favorite moments then would probably be the Nell reveal. Is a good one for me, and also one of the poems, because as you know, one of the things that Kubo will do on his author notes is these little poems, which are almost always, you know, kind of interesting. But the one in particular that he did in this section is hair and fingernails are beautiful ornaments. So why do they seem so baleful when removed? The answer is simple. They are previews of what's to come, of death. And I think that's such a Kubo poem. It's such a Kubo poem. It's very minimalist. It's very stark. It's very barren, but it says a lot. And when you start to kind of like reverse engineer that poem, it's very creepy and very unsettling, and you know, for a series that is fundamentally about death, it's quite appropriate. So even though it's not even actually part of the story, it's just something that's thrown in at the beginning of a chapter. I found that to be a very that one stuck with me.
I'm glad.
That poem is like, it's like, ugh, you know, that's kind of messed up, but very, in the words of Stephen Colbert, it's very truthy. It has a truthiness to it in a very disturbing way.
Yeah, I'm glad that resonated with you. I feel like because there is no third person objective voice as well, these concepts that Kubo can explore in the cover volumes, whoever the character is in the cover, the poem will be about them. So instead of laying something out in direct words within the narrative, that's his way, I suppose, of indirectly characterizing them. If you can give the time and attention to look into it.
Who is that poem about? Do you know?
That one was one of the. Funnily enough, that's one of the Privero on Espada. That's Cirucci. She's the one that fought Uryu Ishida. She had the big yo-yo.
Her, a very minor character.
Very minor character. So yeah,
that's very interesting. Well, that sure stuck with me.
And then yeah, supposed to wrap up this section, Aizen kind of pulls the rug under everyone, being like, actually, I kind of did all this so that I could just trap you guys here. I'm going to go off to Karakura Town and start my real goal of creating the Oaken Key. So he used Orihime and their powers that he needed to, but he also used her as a ploy to entrap Ichigo. Definitely going to discuss Aizen more in our next episode, but yes. With that, I'm happy to wrap up on this Hueco Mundo arc. Yeah, Enzo, are you ready to give a rating or any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go in. Also, by the way, spoiler, little known, Soul King Gyro. Just saying. But my score for this arc is 81. And so kind of I'm pretty consistent with the first mini arc. I'm giving it an extra point because of Nell.
Well, I'm going to be pretty consistent as well. I'm giving it 92. I only give it slightly less because there is that section that I don't enjoy so much.
Yes.
But yeah, there's some cool fights, and that's the Hueco Mundo sub arc of Arrancar, and that will cover the first episode of us touching on the Arrancar arc.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a beast of an arc. We're only halfway through, but yeah, stay tuned next time where we'll be discussing Turn Back the Pendulum, which is a shorter section, as well as the final stretch, the fake Karakura town. So yeah,
Which is the
see you
big
then.
enchilada. See you then.
Yeah.